What is poppin'? It's the Slapton. I am the Slapton, riding these refi waves. And this is This Week in ReFi, where we give you all the refi news that is fit to go ape wild over. Of course, with me is the man with a plan, the man who refuses to give up his summer tan, the 1% man, the Estonian madman, Rez.
Hello, it's me.
It's still you, and it's still us, Rez. And
Still us.
it's still, I feel like, a lull in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still waiting on Vera, and we're still waiting for clarity. And we're still trying to figure out this whole refi thing and crypto thing and macroeconomic thing.
Yep. I was even told by an insider that I shouldn't hold my breath on Vera starting the request for comment in the middle of August. So
I am shocked that we should expect a later consultation than what was provided by Vera, considering how consistent they've been with their timelines to date.
Yeah.
So speaking of timelines, we got to get cracking, man, because even if the stories are harder to come by, we still will bring them to you because, Rez, this is crypto and this is refi, and we got a mission, and we gonna do it. So, Solid World DAO, maybe you've heard of them, Rez. Maybe you're a founder of them. I don't know. Maybe. You and Stenver, the two founders, have been on this podcast. I don't know, dude. Apparently, there's the Solid World DAO, and they're partnering with Vlinder. And I like Vlinder because it sounds like blender, and blenders are good for making smoothies.
Yes, I think Vlinder means butterfly in Dutch. I might be wrong about the language, but it definitely means butterfly in some language.
I like butterflies. So give us the rundown, Sir Rez. What do we got with this Vlinder and Solid World DAO partnership?
For the people who haven't heard of Vlinder, they are one of the leading financiers of blue carbon mangrove projects around the world. So they do a lot of work in the very important area of reforesting degraded mangroves. And they, after a very long and intimate session of sharing alpha between each other, we realized that we're extremely aligned, and we're now working together in order to provide liquidity to the market. So we want to do blue carbon. We don't want to do forwards. They buy forwards. They make forward deals. It's a great relationship. Also, they're very cool.
Okay.
I mean, these are some of the people behind Treecoin. If you haven't heard of Treecoin, this was one of the this was a huge ICO in 2017, I believe, that ended up actually saving one of the first blue carbon projects from bankruptcy through doing an ICO and getting this project money. So it's still around today in the form of Mangrove DAO, which is honestly very underrated and a very cool small DAO that is the love child of Treecoin. Let's put it this way: the logical next step on their path to managing on-chain assets.
Well said. And for those who don't know, how would you describe blue carbon?
Yeah, so blue carbon is a group of carbon offsets that are involved that involve some amount of water. So in general, when people say blue carbon today, they mean mangroves, which are these forests that grow in coastal areas, like directly on top of coastal areas. And they are super cool because, for instance, they aren't prone to wild forest fires. They have a lot of biodiversity benefits. They store a lot more carbon because they have, roots deep underground in the water, and the CO2 gets captured a bit more efficiently. And they look very cool, even though I've heard that some people think they look stupid, which I think is a bad take, and they're wrong.
Yeah, so my conception of them is those twisting vines that kind of spread, and then if you're in a thick mangrove forest, I remember there was a movie where someone had to learn how to move with the jungle, and so they had to dip in and out of all the vines. That was my first exposure to mangroves. But yeah, they're super cool. Yeah, and that is a very cool thing that they are resistant to things like fires because they got water usually around them, right? Yeah, very good.
Mangroves are wet.
Mangroves are wet. Yes, sir. That's why they're blue. Okay, that's exciting news. Solid World DAO continues to forge their path, and we will keep you updated on them, of course.
Doing stuff.
Indeed. So this is a kind of a human interest story, I'd say. This is a call to action directly. If you're listening to this, this is Redemption DAO. This is a effort to save rainforest in the Congolese rainforest, right, in the Congo. So the government there is planning to auction 30 tracts of pristine rainforest to oil companies at the end of this month, and Redemption DAO is wanting to outbid these oil companies to preserve this land. And I will leave links to everything to basically to get involved. I'm in the Telegram chat right now. What says you about this, Sir Rez?
Well, I think the government of Congo essentially said that they don't care about solving climate change and they would like money. And I kind of get that on one hand because, it is a developing nation and they do need resources. But it's still upsetting to read about since the areas that they are trying to auction off are about 3 years worth of global emissions. So it's not exactly like the planet can afford to deforest this area. It just can't. So the thing that upsets me currently about this is essentially it is a private auction. So people can't even get involved. There can't be like non-profits going like, oh, let us in, because it's a private auction. They are auctioning this off to oil companies. So the question is, why? And could we change this? And this is one of the things that Redemption DAO is working on, I believe, is making the auction public so they could actually participate, then participating, and then saving as much land as they can. It's very similar to Constitution DAO for people who haven't seen this crypto story about a year ago, where a bunch of people on the internet collected their crypto in order to buy one of the original copies of the Constitution, if I remember correctly. They didn't manage to do it, they were outbid, but it was still a very cool effort, and I think everyone in the ReFi space is hoping that we can repeat that kind of a vibe, but successfully save some land in the process.
Yeah, well said. So I think a couple of things you brought up are worth discussing. One is the priorities of developing nations. I think, I live in a developed nation. I think a lot of people in ReFi do. And so we have a hard time understanding the perspective of these countries. I know a little bit about that area of Africa. I did a couple reports on it for completely different reasons. It's incredibly unstable politically, economically, socially. It's war-torn. It's been war-torn forever as far as since European powers have gotten involved. Right now I believe it's being economically colonized by China. These are some of the most bleakest places in the world to live in.
Yep.
So for them to care about 60 years down, whatever it is, because of climate, it's like, in a lot of ways, I really can't fault them. It's a case of like, Maslow's hierarchy, right? I think that's who it is. Yeah, it's like you just have to make sure that you're going to live tomorrow. And I think that's honestly where they're at. But which isn't to say that it isn't our responsibility to maybe try to help them out. I think that's really the takeaway from this is if you're going to participate in a world that is so top heavy in terms of where wealth is, then you're going to run into these inevitable climate problems, because you can't expect these countries, in my humble opinion, to care about climate when they're figuring out where their next meal is coming from. That's just not reasonable.
This is essentially like during deep winter, eating all of the seeds that will grow your next crop. This is the level of desperation involved in doing something like this.
Right. So, I'm very hesitant to finger wag at these people and say, why are you doing this? Because I'm not sure I wouldn't. But yeah, that is, and it's an interesting thing. So it speaks to maybe the solution is that we need to think economically to spread the ReFi vibes. I mean, there's a bunch of reports that say that a country has to reach a certain medium income before the population cares about climate change.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've read those, right? I don't know what the
Yeah.
number is, but at a certain point,
Me neither.
yeah. But there's a certain value at which the median income has to be, or else they don't care. And this speaks directly to what we're talking about. So
Yeah, and these are the people actually most impacted by climate change at the same time. So it's a fucked up combination.
right.
Not good.
Now, the thing you mentioned about the private auction is very interesting. If they do want top dollar, you would think they would make it public. So it's strange that that wouldn't happen, which makes me think that there's probably something political happening under,
Yeah.
a layer under what we're seeing, where perhaps there's a sweetheart deal with these oil companies and they've been kicking back money to these essential rulers, whatever you want to call them, dictators, for a while. Who knows? But it'll be interesting to see if ReFi DAO succeeds. I will be behind the effort. I know you will be. And I hope everybody listening will at least spread the word and be educated on it, because it seems like maybe these problems are too big to solve, but they aren't if we all coalesce around them. Constitution DAO was very close.
Please.
Very close to doing what they wanted to do. And I would argue that that was a more competitive thing than this.
So guys, please shill the fuck out of Redemption DAO. They really deserve it. These are legitimate people behind it. It is definitely not a scam. These are well-meaning people in the ReFi community banding together, trying to get something done.
Indeed. So yeah, at the very least, share the tweet. All right, cool, man. So
yeah.
Next thing we've got is from Carbon Pulse. Of course, it's behind a paywall, so we can't show the entire article. We'll show the headline. We'll discuss the story. But Carbon Pulse says, huge looming Redd.Plus issuance sparks unease in voluntary carbon markets. And the little blurb that was visible is a massive Redd.Plus carbon credit issuance expected in the coming months. And some experts say that tens of millions of forest protection units are not fit for the voluntary market, while the willingness of buyers to support the efforts remains in the balance. That is the top level overview. Do you want to go into more detail on that, Sir Rez?
Okay. Let's have a quick chat about registries and their role in the voluntary carbon market. So we have about like 3 large registries. These are Vera, who we keep complaining about, and then there is Gold Standard, and then there is CDM. CDM is kind of on its way out. It got created after the Paris Agreement. It was a Kyoto Protocol, which is like a very a historical event. It's very old, is what I'm trying to say. And then there's Gold Standard and Vera, who are like these bigger modern carbon registries, who people trust that these units mean something. And then we have some alt registries who are really trying to do very good carbon accounting, and then we have some that really aren't. So based on what I've seen people saying about what is happening here, this is in the category of the MRV, or how these numbers have been arrived at is basically just not trustworthy. And so we understand the scale of how many credits are being issued here. I think I saw a number around, what was it, 90 million 90 million carbon credit, or carbon credit equivalent things sold on the voluntary carbon market. Yeah, 90 million issuing 90 million credits. So for context, this is half of what the voluntary carbon market has ever created.
Yeah, massive numbers
on major registries. Yeah.
And so are you comfortable talking about the registry that is
I think yeah, it's essentially something called Redd.Plus, which seems to be a coalition of developing countries and some sort of a central organization that I can't really identify.
Yeah, looks like but Papua New Guinea, Belize, Honduras, Gabon, Ghana, all these countries.
Yeah. So people seem to have a bit of a problem with how the accounting is being done, and it's a bit problematic. And additionally, they use this term somewhere of being Paris Agreement compliant or something like this.
It's like aligned, right?
Yeah, it's be Paris Agreement compliant, which is like such a interesting, term, like intergovernmental carbon trading is, what the Paris Agreement is. It's like a set of agreements on how do we do carbon accounting and how do we hold, countries accountable for what they are promising to deliver on.
Yeah.
And it's very confusing messaging, and as a person who has been in the voluntary carbon market for some time now, I am deeply confused on who is going to end up buying these and how that is going to affect the optics of the voluntary carbon market as a whole.
Right. So some of the reasons why possibly these credits could be nobody would wants to buy them would be something like there's no additionality, right? They're putting a price tag on high forested areas that are not under threat. Nobody wants to develop them, and that's why you would get value to preserve. Would be to say, well, these were going to be developed, but we took them out of the open market, and now we're protecting them. But if that's not going to happen, then why would you give anybody money for that? And the little research I've done, and I am certainly not an expert, it seems like a lot of these credits are that. It's just, hey, we got this land. We talked about this last week. We got this land. Yeah. Let's make money on it. So it's always...
It's complicated because when we're talking about this Redd.Plus site, based on my understanding, they essentially work directly with governments. So you technically are funding like government activities, and these developing nations do deserve money to, not have to do what the Congo is currently doing. But on the other hand, the question more comes down to, is this the proper mechanism to fund these sorts of things? Because the voluntary carbon market should work in this way of, I am offsetting my carbon footprint, or doing more than my carbon footprint is, in the hope that I will not be contributing to climate change in like a predictable manner. While this sort of thing really isn't fit for purpose for that, because essentially you are supporting a developing nation's government potentially, but it doesn't really have anything to do with carbon accounting directly. So that's the issue here.
Yeah, for me, it seems like like you said, it was beautiful, and I agree, because we just talked about like, okay, we have these countries that need money, they do desperate things. Okay, we don't want that. So yeah, give them money, it's going to help them out. But the problem I have is like, for carbon accounting, like you have to find a buyer for it. Like imagine the issue now is somebody can say, I offset my carbon. It's like, no, you didn't, like it's fine to give them money so that they have incentives not to do desperate things with their environment. But it's not fine if you're saying that this was somehow offsetting carbon, because it wasn't, right?
Yeah,
in my
exactly.
humble opinion. And so then if you have a company that's buying them to say we offset our carbon, it's like, you didn't. And so that's the problem. So it's almost in a way, maybe, I don't know what you could say. It would better be under like a grant. I don't know what you'd call.
Yeah, essentially, like a grant, or there is a option of essentially governments trading between each other, and essentially that being the mechanism through which you could do some of this. But in the voluntary carbon market, trading, emissions that didn't happen and wouldn't have happened is not like a way you stop climate change directly. So it becomes problematic here if companies do this. On a governmental level, we can discuss this essentially, because these forests are huge carbon sinks. So, and government should be very mindful of how much they're emitting, how much they're sequestering, and this could be potentially agreed upon on that level, but not on like a corporate buying these Redd.Plus credits in the hope that they will be, and I quote, Paris Agreement compliant.
There you go. Well said. All right, let's do this one quick. We got Regen Network. They've launched Ledger version 4. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't even know there was Ledger version 1 through 3, and I'm going to be further honest with you. I don't understand this. But what I do know is it looks really cool. I'm going to dig into this. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. And this is an open invitation to people from Regen Network to educate us on their platform. We love to learn. and
Yeah.
we're open to it. But I'll leave a link to this as well. A lot of stuff there. We just didn't have time to go over it. So there's that. Okay, that's the refi news. Let's get into the more macro stuff. Let's get into crypto in general. Our favorite centralized lending protocol that is now in bankruptcy, Chapter 11, Celsius, continues to amaze, right? Continues
Yes.
to show us the way. So now, they did all sorts of risky things. It was they were running there's allegations that they were pumping up their native token with deposits, which is highly illegal. And now it comes out that one of their third-party vendors, I believe, Customer.io, there was a malicious actor and Customer.io that leaked Celsius customer information, including at least emails. There could be more. Customer.io saying it's just one employee and it was just emails. Celsius has asked for more proof of that. None has been given. So this. It's the gift that keeps on giving, Rez.
It really is. Like, oh my god, just like these centralized entities doing weird shit is basically like a recurring theme on this show at this point, I think. And yeah, I do not envy the people who had their emails leaked. I'm
That's
reminded
me, bro.
of
I'm that
yeah.
person.
Yeah, I'm reminded of this, in the long ago when Ledger, one of the main wallet,
Hard,
off-chain cold wallet solutions, they had their customers' emails and addresses leaked, which is like, hey, that at this address there is like a wallet that holds crypto with transactions that can't be reversed, so maybe you should show up with a gun, question mark?
right. And even worse than that was then there were phishing attacks, right? Because then
Yeah,
they knew the
constant.
customer list and they'd spoof a Ledger promotion or security
Yeah.
update. That's why I didn't
Yeah,
buy. I have Trezor for that very reason, because of that
and
breach.
this is gonna happen again here. People are gonna get scammed again, like 100% guaranteed. This is what happens with these emails. Usually, it seems like a highly lucrative business. That is very worrying because there are just a lot of incentives to just scam the fuck out of people.
Yeah, at the very. I mean, I've already saw tweets not saying that they got scammed, but now all sorts of targeted email about crypto projects have reached their inbox that they never subscribed to. All at the very least, it'll be that. It'll just be annoying. Yeah, man. I use centralized exchanges. I think everybody does. That's in crypto, right? It's usually because it's a fiat on ramp.
Yeah.
Lessons to be learned are don't keep I don't keep all of my money. I keep a fraction of my money on centralized exchanges. I make my trades and I get off, right? And I think that's my lesson from all this. The other lesson, obviously, is if you're going to get into an earn protocol, some sort of lending protocol where you give them your crypto, just don't give them more than you're willing to lose. I mean, it's the same old adage, right? I mean,
Yep.
what else
Don't
can you
put your
say?
life savings in a quote savings account unquote that is promising you 20% yields. That is not a savings account. This is like a degen piggy bank, and it's going to get crushed. It's
Eventually it
not
will, yeah. No, eventually, yeah.
it's
And
not
it
a
could
good
even be
thing,
good
yeah.
for 3-4 years. 5 years. Celsius was years, but eventually, yes, it's going to because markets, especially in crypto, they're volatile and they wreck people. All right, man. So that's our Celsius news of the day. Speaking of wrecking people, it's like the opposite of wrecking people. The Fed, they raise rates 75 basis point, 0.75%, and you would think that would mean bearish news. You would think that would mean because money's harder to come by, people would be selling off, they'd be risk off, and we saw
Yeah.
just the opposite. Crypto has been pumping. TradFi has been pumping. Freaking Amazon pumped like 15% off hours last night for God knows what
Everybody's
reason.
pumping, yeah.
Like completely insane. Why, Rez? Why is this happening?
Reasons. I think, degen shit just generally has a tendency of happening in the markets. Uh And sometimes you just don't need good reasons, and sometimes vestige and shit can last for years. I mean, the stock market doesn't necessarily have to even be correlated with reality. It just has to be correlated with investor sentiment. That's basically what matters at the end of the day. So when the Fed announced that, hey, by the way, we're not raising interest rates as much as it was anticipated that we would raise it, everybody was like, wow, okay, crisis over, like everything's fine. I am having the best day of my life. Look at all of this money. That is, go look at all of my numbers. They're going up. And because the numbers are going up, I should probably put more numbers in so they could also go up. And yes.
It's incredible, man. 75 basis points is not a small amount. And
It's not.
Here's the other thing, is the Fed has explicitly said they're looking for 2% inflation in the American economy. Right now, it's close to 10%. We've got a long way to go to get to the Fed's goal, and I believe the Fed is going to act aggressively. So, I mean, I can't forecast, I can't day trade, that's not my game, but I would think with all of that looming, with the GDP of America down for the second quarter in a row, which is the technical definition of a recession, by the way, that people would be risk off pulling assets out of these things. And it's the complete. So I have a theory on this. There's two things. One is people are desperate for yield. One, that they're used to it at this point. We've had it at an extreme pace for the last whatever years. So they're like, well, we this is what it is. We always have this. They're desperate for it. And there's no other, like, where do you put it?
Yeah.
Everybody's currency is inflationary.
Yep.
So where do you go? And I think that's really the case right now, is people just don't have a place to put their cash, and they're putting it in these equities.
Yep. And in crypto, because Ethereum is at like surprisingly high levels considering the market right now.
Bitcoin as well. Yeah, all of them are. Solana's up like 10%. Bitcoin's up like 5% today. Yeah, 1,700, over 1,700 Ethereum, over 2,400 Bitcoin. It was struggling to break 20K. It doesn't make sense to me. Everybody that I've talked to, all like what I'd call savvy investors and traders, are just confused by this. They say the same
Everybody's
thing.
confused.
Yeah, everybody's confused.
I have a friend who was shorting Ethereum all the way up, and
Rex City. I know a guy who's doing that too. Yeah.
But thinking that the market is rational and will behave in a predictable manner is exactly how you end up losing money. Sadly, sometimes just nothing makes sense.
I was explaining this. I tutor students, and this is a former student of mine who keeps up with me. He texts me because he just got into crypto. He's like a young kid, and he just invested for the first time this week, and he's riding this roller coaster, and he's asking me, he's texting me like, why is this happening? And I texted him back like, that question is unanswerable. And so my conception of this is markets over a long period of time tend to rationalize, not always, of course. In the short term, they can be highly irrational. Because they're collections of people, and in the short term, people are highly irrational. Over a long span, you tend to see some rationalization in the market, which is why I tend to invest over long periods of time. I do think that we're going to rationalize, which basically means we have to crash out if the Fed keeps raising their rates. Like, that's how economics works. If you keep raising the rates to borrow money, it's harder to borrow money, liquidity dries up, and economies sputter. And they keep, like, that's their goal right now. This has to happen. If it doesn't happen, everything about economics is thrown out the window. So
it's fun to watch from the sidelines. At least I always enjoy watching things go up. I equally enjoy watching things go down. I think I have a problem.
you would do really well at like a hot air balloon convention.
Oh, yeah. It's like, oh, it's going down. Oh, it's going up again. Oh my god, this is the best day ever.
We need to make that happen.
Yeah, hot air balloon convention.
And our last story is Cathie Wood sells Coinbase shares amid insider trading allegations. We covered this, I believe, last week. SEC is investigating altcoins that were listed on Coinbase, and it is believed. I think there is some evidence to suggest that there were people in Coinbase that knew of these offerings. They knew it was going to be listed, and they made it's alleged over $1.5 million just playing that information. Cathie Wood, of course, is a seasoned and influential investor in the crypto space and TradFi, and she was one of the biggest proponents of Coinbase, even buying it as it was dipping. And she finally says, "I'm out." What do you think? What do you think the signals, Reds?
I am really short most centralized exchanges. I think ultimately I'm hoping on-chain will win eventually. We get better fiat ramps into on-chain directly without going through centralized exchanges, like transact.com or there are a few others. MoonPay, I think, was one of these. But essentially, they allow you to put the money directly on chain instead of going through these centralized exchanges, because these centralized exchanges seem just a bit shady and maybe very not transparent. And if you can even have this doubt of, I wonder if they actually have my assets or if they've loaned them out to Celsius or Free Arrow Capital or something, then you're in kind of this situation of going like, maybe that's not like the ideal place for me to have my stuff,
Yes, this last couple months, and I would probably hazard to say the next few more months are going to just be a chapter and verse lesson on the dangers of centralization, particularly centralization without regulation. So what I think is interesting is in TradFi, we have centralization with regulation, and that's corrupt enough. Now, it's weird because DeFi set out to decentralize, but of course, then you get decentralized entity like Coinbase taking advantage of these innovations, and you get the worst of both worlds. You get centralization and no regulation, right? So
non-regulated, untransparent, centralized entities are the enemy of all good things on the planet. I continue to believe this. Pick your lane.
Yeah.
But please don't be a centralized entity that is not accountable to anybody. That is a bad combination, and I think, do we have any evidence that this has ever ended well? I don't think we do. There are just too many perverse incentives to do bad things.
Yeah, I mean, think of the temptation too of these people that knew of all these coin, like the Coinbase effect when you list something on Coinbase, it pumps like crazy,
and it pumps.
And then it drops immediately. Like think of the temptation of these workers who knew it was going to happen. Like they made I don't know where these people are. They made life-changing money, man. I mean, they're in trouble now, but
yes. If you work on any crypto project, please, for the love of God, don't insider trade your own crypto. That is fucked up. Don't do it.
I agree.
It's not good.
I made a post in the Telegram of BANCOR, who we talked about recently, and not to rehash that old thing, but failed protocol, impermanent loss protection that was just basically unsustainable. And now there's a situation where they're trying to figure out how to dig out of the hole. And it's very interesting to see because all of these BNT holders, which are the equity holders, are proposing measures to hurt the LPs in the name of BNT holders, the equity holders. And
Game theory.
Yeah. Well, I wrote, this is why, whenever you do that, to your point, if you are a crypto project worker that does insider trading, you are inviting regulators to wreck this space. So when the regulations come and they're onerous and burdensome and they're destroying DeFi, if you're the sort of person who is doing unscrupulous things, it is on you as much as it is the regulators, because they will come into the space if you give them an excuse. Right?
Yeah, exactly. There's just going to be so much evidence of, look at all of these weird people who were unaccountable and then earned a bunch of money at the expense of everybody else. It's not cool. So we should hold people more to account for how they behave in the space. Even on a social level, we shouldn't accept this as okay. In terms of BANCOR insider trading, I haven't heard anything in that style, but I do understand what you mean when you say that it's in their situation, it's very complicated because it's almost like zero sum. It's you either privilege the holders of your token, which was supposed to be diluted in the insurance event, or you actually mm, give preference to the people that put in the productive assets that make your protocol actually work in the first place. So, in my head, it's a very easy trade-off of, if you want a healthy protocol, the second group is who you have to privilege. But I understand that it's not an easy pill to swallow, especially if you're a BNT holder.
Well, the other thing too is in TradFi and in every established economic system, you'd have a senior and junior position, and debtors, people who lend money, are above equity holders always. You never preference equity holders over debtors, ever. It's never done. And equity holders also have the expectation of higher reward, so they have the expectation of higher risk, right? Yep. So, but it just, the long and short of it is these equity holders now are this gets into governance, which I can go on forever about. The governance token is BNT. So now the equity holders are the people that are going to decide what happens, right? So you talk about just a conflict of interest. It's a nightmare.
Oh, well, dude, it's even more complicated than that. I'm currently writing a set of Medium posts about turbo death spirals, which are, the thing that we discussed last week as a checklist. I'm making that into a Medium post. But I also wrote a case study about BANCOR in there. And the problem is that if you don't do things that privilege the value of BNT, the LPs, the people providing the other tokens, actually lose money as well, because every time BNT loses value, everybody's impermanent loss goes up.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right.
It's a very cyclical system that also lends itself very well to being abused by short sellers, who will then come into the market and wreck your protocol on purpose because they can make money off of it. Why wouldn't they? It's not even market manipulation. You just define the rules of the game in a way that this is possible. It's it's as if like the value of a stock at a company could destroy the underlying company. Does that seem like a very good setup? I don't particularly think so. Let's say an irrational market starts selling your company shares, and then your company stops being able to function.
Yeah, good point. All right, Rez, we did it. We did the thing. Always a pleasure. We will catch you on the next one. Rez, what are you bench pressing these days?
Still the same. What are you bench pressing these days?
I asked you first.
65 kilograms.
66 kilograms. That's how much I'm bench pressing.
Cool. Okay. See you later, guys.
Catch you next one. Peace, dudes and dudettes. Remember to ape responsibly.